Hello everybody and welcome back to Kerbal's space program, where we've been working on this beautiful monstrosity here and trying to get it to fly, and surprisingly it does. It absolutely flies like a brick, but here we are. So we didn't have quite enough speed last time, although we were so close to getting this thing into a sustainable orbit, and so we added on some additional SRBs. And what that ends up meaning is we also added additional fuel up here, which ends up being a good thing because it means that we're going to have presumably some fuel left over for this poodle here. But what it also means is that we're going to have a small problem. And by small, I mean a potentially catastrophic problem. And that problem is that this mainsail, it's really not going to be capable of lifting this once the SRBs detach. I want to know how much it's not capable of lifting it. We know it's not going to be capable, but I want to give it a go. I want to see how fast we get going with the SRBs, and I want to see how slow we go with the mainsail once we get to that point. We can add more engines in the stack above the SRBs and below the fuel tanks in our boosters, but I would prefer to avoid that if it's possible. We'll find out. The additional SRBs here, for the record, also mean that we're probably going to have some joint weakness in our joint here to here. We know there was already some weakness, and we just boosted the power of this by 50%. So that's going to be pretty significant, right? Let's throttle up, and let's put ourselves into surface up and see how this goes. It's gonna be spicy. Little slow off the pad. We knew that would be the case at 1.49 off pad thrust to weight, and that's going to go up fast, really fast. A huge amount of this weight is in the SRBs. SRB detachment is also going to be interesting. The Separatrons may or may not be enough for that, so we shall see. For the moment, we're just going to go straight up until such a time as the SRBs burn off. I really feel like we have to be going straight up for the SRBs. Otherwise, there's just too much potential that they might cause significant issues. And of course, we're going to get a little kick from our Separatrons here to try to push us up and away from them a little bit. But to be honest, it's going to be the kick here pushing it out that's going to give us the clearance, in theory. So how much fuel are we burning here? Okay, we're burning some, but it's not a huge amount. We've got about 40 seconds of SRB burn left, and yeah, I can definitely see that we're at a bit of a differential angle here. So this is at a vertical position, but this, as you can see, is at a slight angle. We're building up a little bit of horizontal speed. I'm not terribly concerned about that. That'll go away once the SRBs do. So that seems fine. Another fix that we could do for that is we could just have a strut here and a strut here. That may help matters somewhat. I say somewhat. That may help matters quite a lot. Well, we'll see how fast we get going here. It's not terribly fast thus far. I think we're losing a lot of speed to drag. Like, this should be going a lot faster than this, but I have to believe that this is drag. We're through max Q, so that's no problem. We've got about 10 seconds of burn time left in these SRBs, and we're traveling at about 500 meters per second. It's not phenomenal, is it? I'm going to take us into orbital velocity as soon as our SRBs are clear, assuming a good SRB detachment. Let's see how this goes. 2, 1, 0. SRBs are off. Okay. So once the SRBs detach, we don't have the fins here anymore, so we start to tumble. That's a clear problem. 0.69 is a lot better than I expected to see this thrust to weight be. Of course, that's a catastrophic failure because of that tumble. And to that end, that of course means that we need to replace the fins that we had down here. So that's not surprising. I should have done that before even doing that test. But we'll just put these guys right on there, and that should solve that problem. We had to do 6 of them, or we could do 3 of them if we're concerned about the weight or the cost. I am a little concerned about the weight, to be honest. I'm going to go down to 3. So it's going to be, no, not 6, 3. There we go. So we're going to do 3 here and see if that will do the trick, and that'll just cause us to carry a little bit less weight. So once this detachment happens, we want this fuel to be drained here and not here. But we want it to happen here at first, right? Or do we? Well, we can override that later on manually if we want to. For now, let's put this out on the pad. I'm thinking that we might want to change the fuel attachment point on those external tanks. We're not going to have enough fuel in the big orange tanks, for sure, to get ourselves to orbit. That's 100% going to be a thing. So if we want to fully utilize those side tanks, we are absolutely going to need to put this into a refueling orbit, right? We put it into orbit and we bring up a refueling tank, attach it here, and then we fill up these tanks here. The detachment there is there. Sure. So this is currently planned to ditch these tanks. We'll see what kind of DV we have before we make a final determination on that. Okay, let's throttle this up, and off we go. So the idea is that with these fins here, we should have, hopefully, enough control authority to maintain position after the SRBs detach. Keep in mind, the SRBs have all of these fins. That's 12 total fins, plus they gimbal. So that gives us a lot of control authority. And once they go away, that becomes an issue. But for now, this will have to do. So up we go, and we can't really physics warp this. Our thrust to weight is pretty good, actually, but I think our drag is just insanely high. But I was surprised that our thrust to weight, once we detached this, was like 0.68. That was better than expected. I didn't look at what our apoapsis was. I should have. I definitely should have looked at what our apoapsis was at detachment. Okay, let's just bring this guy up for now, and we've got about 37 seconds until these SRBs detach. All of that is looking good. I would normally physics warp this, but we just can't. We cannot physics warp at this time. It's too bendy. It's not a viable option. So our current speed is about 350 meters per second. I can definitely see the angle building here. So you can see this is straight up. This is at a like 5, maybe an 8 degree angle. And it's kind of retrograde from the direction we want it to be going. We could launch this thing in reverse. Maybe not an awful idea. So that way we'd be building up at least a little bit of correct horizontal speed rather than this being essentially negative speed. But it's not that much speed, really. It really, really isn't. So the Separatrons are doing a good job of getting us a clean separation. I like that. Our apoapsis height is about 40 kilometers at separation. Okay. Okay, so Separatrons burn out. We're tumbling right now. I'm not on prograde. We're still on up for the moment. So we're seeing if this is enough to get this tumble under control. And the answer is no, it's not. Okay. We can go all the way around and just eat the momentum loss, but it's really not a good thing to do. It's really not a good thing to do. We're in surface up still at this point, so that's where we're trying to go. And if we kick the engine back on, it'll start bringing us back up. But we just lost like 100 meters per second in vertical momentum from that tumble. So solving that tumble is definitely a thing that needs to happen. It was much slower with these fins, It's a little odd, isn't it? Because I wouldn't have expected that to be an issue there. It wasn't previously. So that must have something to do with the aerodynamic force. I'm wondering how much fuel we have left in these tanks. It's a good amount. We have quite a lot of fuel still there. In fact, overall, we just generally have a lot of fuel. But we're also at a lower thrust to weight right now than we would be without that tumble, because we would have been burning that entire time, right? So that's absolutely an issue, and at this point I think we can physics warp just to see where this puts us, although it's not going to be phenomenal. Although we are seeing our orbital velocity begin to increase at this point, so that's neat. We're still not at an apoapsis height of being in vacuum, and we can see our time to apoapsis is coming down on the prograde marker. So this is clearly an issue of having too low thrust here, and we could increase our number of fins. That wouldn't affect our thrust to weight ratio that much, and if it prevented that tumble, that would absolutely be worthwhile. We are still over 100 meters per second down from when that tumble began, I believe. And most of our thrust to weight, or actually all of our thrust to weight, is being consumed by gravity at this time. So that is absolutely a significant issue, and getting this thrust to weight ratio up earlier would be a very, very good thing. So yeah, we can burn out all of the rest of this fuel. That's absolutely fine and not an issue. That tumble absolutely is. So let's pull this back. If we don't have that tumble, we are in a significantly better position. So I think what we need to do is we can double the number of tail fins here, so taking that up to 6. 4 was the number that we had previously, and that number, of course, was sufficient at the speed we were going. So let's save this, put this out on the pad, and let's see how this goes. So our thrust to weight isn't all that high. That's a core issue. And the question now is, without that tumble, do we feel like we make it into space? Like into orbit, without having to dip into our interplanetary transfer. Although, if we're going to do a refuel, that doesn't matter. Indeed, that would not matter if we're going to do a refuel. So let's see how it feels. If we can avoid the tumble, that's going to be a huge deal. But of course, we're not terribly surprised by the tumble, just somewhat saddened by it. So up we go. I would love to physics warp this, but what I'm going to do is we're going to be back about the time that the SRB detaches. I'm just going to cut this out. We've seen a lot of this. We don't need to see this yet again. So we'll be back once we're to the important part here. Okay, so here we are about to SRB detachment. 2 seconds, 1 second, and SRB detachment. Man, those Separatrons are loud. So we definitely held attitude way better there. I want to move us to orbital prograde very, very shortly here. I'm going to wait, I think, until our apoapsis reaches 50 kilometers. I see our time to apoapsis is holding at 1 minute, 10 seconds. And you can see our orbital velocity is going down due to our reduced thrust to weight. So there's our apoapsis height crossing 50. We're definitely underpowered, and we could put in engines here that are intended to be dropped, like, once these tanks are dry. We drop the engines, but we carry the dry tanks, and then refuel in orbit. That's a thing that we could definitely do. And it would be much easier to create a refueler for that. We just have to make sure that we had, you know, enough fuel. So for now, this is fine, and we're still building up, well, horizontal speed at this point. We have a long ways to go on that, right? So we've got a lot of fuel in these tanks here. We've still got about half the fuel in these tanks, so that's a long, long burn time. Our thrust to weight is still quite low. But this is a heavy payload, and this is not terribly surprising. So we have an apoapsis height of about 65 kilometers at this point. To be honest, I would like to go to horizontal velocity up, but I'm watching that time to apoapsis and thinking about our thrust to weight, and I'm thinking, I don't know about that, Chief. It's kind of spicy. We may want to sit here until we have an apoapsis height of 80 or 90. Our thrust to weight is still only 0.79, right? Our vertical speed, or not our vertical speed, our overall speed is now increasing. So that's a good sign, but we have a long ways to go before we get this puppy to orbit. That's for sure. So this is currently set up to be the next detachment. I'm going to move that up to here. And yeah, that's going to break things a little bit, but that's understood. We're going to have to keep an eye on the fuel here, because the game is not necessarily designed for what we're trying to do, right? Our next staging event is going to be to jettison this core. So that's absolutely fine. And I'm just watching our apoapsis height here and our time to apoapsis and our thrust to weight. And I'm thinking we really, really could use more power in this stage. We really could. 1.825 meter is kind of an awkward size, but we could fit in some additional... I'm just wondering about... Okay, that's good clearance. We could fit in some additional engines here and be firing those. It'll burn through this fuel faster and increase our thrust to weight, which is not necessarily bad things, as long as we're planning on keeping these tanks, ideally. So this is going to be potentially a lot of Delta V for transferring to Duna once this is all filled up. But we have to get it to orbit first, right? So that's absolutely a large concern here. We're going to be through these tanks shortly. And then we've still got this fuel here. So we're at 0.95 thrust to weight right now. You can see that we're at about 60 seconds to apoapsis. And this low thrust to weight means that we are required to go to a high orbit, which is a bit problematic for our refueler, because that means that our refueler is going to have to burn more fuel to get there. So that's absolutely a concern. Let's just go to horizontal velocity up at this time. So we are in vacuum. We don't have to worry about anything like our tail fins. They're not actually doing anything. So that looks good, and at this point, we're starting to burn some of this fuel. So I want to just hold here for a while. Our thrust to weight is finally crested 1.0. So I want to see what this ends up looking like. This will, I think, actually get us to orbit. If we have enough time. I'm just watching our time to apoapsis here, and I'm thinking, we've got a long ways to go. We've got about another kilometer per second to go here. And we're accelerating, to be sure. Not quite at the speed we'd like to. Also, our inclination isn't dead on where we'd like to be, but it's fine. I'm not terribly concerned about that. But we've got about 30 seconds to the apoapsis if we were to cut our engines right now. And that's absolutely understood. Yeah, we have so much more to go here. This is going to be spicy for sure. Our thrust to weight is getting up there, so it's at 1.21. That's still pretty low, to be sure. That's still quite low. But I'm just thinking about how we might better be able to achieve this right now. I definitely think, yeah, we can see our time to apoapsis is struggling at this moment. We're going to have to get a little bit more verticality here, so we're going to have to put ourselves over in kill rot, and I'm watching time to apoapsis. It is going down, but less quickly, so let's put it about here. Now time to apoapsis is going up. So let's push that up to somewhere around 30 seconds, and then go back to horizontal velocity up. We're much closer to orbital velocity at this point, so that looks okay. (26, 27, 28, 29, and 30). Okay, back over to horizontal velocity up. And this is now going up to about 40 seconds. Time is still increasing. Okay. Let's put this at about an apoapsis height of 125. So we're going to be cutting off this engine fairly soon here. We're very close now to orbital velocity. I'm surprised that this has taken us as far as it has. We're technically in orbit now, although it's a decaying orbit. Okay, engine shutdown almost. I'm just fine-tuning our apoapsis. Oh, 125,000.5 meters. You know what? I'll take it. That's pretty close. So at the apoapsis, we're going to need to add a maneuver here, and this is going to be bringing this out to be circularized. We're in orbit at this moment, and this is an absolutely acceptable orbit, but I just want to circularize it just that little bit. That's going to be about 30 more meters per second, and we do still have a little bit of fuel in these tanks. So let's go ahead and align to the node. We should definitely make sure to extend our solar panels. Not that we have much of solar panels, to be sure. But we'll extend the little solar panels that we've got, and that looks great. Okay. So we're just aligning right now. We can definitely physics warp that alignment. I'm actually surprised by how far this got us. Would have gotten us a little further, too, if we had dropped these tanks. But I really do want to bring them along. A refueling mission is not ideal, but if we only have to do it once, that's not the end of the world. Okay, so at this point, let's go ahead and warp forward. We've got about 5 minutes there. Okay. So it's now saying 28.8. Okay, whatever. I don't actually care so much about the maneuver here, so 210 mark. Let's just get this a little bit more cautiously. Good enough. So that looks great at this point, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move what little fuel remains here just into these tanks up here. We don't need to utilize any additional fuel from here. We had a little bit left over, which is actually surprising. So we're going to move this fuel up here at this time. So all of those are pinned open, and we're going to tell this out. That's kind of slow. In fact, that's quite slow. We're going to want to probably time warp that. Okay. So that fuel is out of there. Excellent. And we've got one more tank of these, so let's just do out here. And we're moving that fuel up so that it's used in a more efficient engine from here. Surprisingly, that actually filled all of these up. I thought we'd have enough space for the two of those, but not quite. So in that case, I would like to... I'm going to put this up here. It's going to throw off our fuel a little bit, but this is, or rather our weight ratio a little bit, but this is so small that I don't think it really matters. So at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to eject this. There we go. And we're just going to keep this around. So from here, we can run a refueling mission that would dock up right here. And then that would refuel these tanks. And the question is, how much do we actually need? Well, it's going to be 810 liquid fuel and the equivalent amount of oxidizer times 12. So 810, if I can get the calculator, times 12 would be 9,720 liquid fuel. Each one of these tanks, of course, is... no nearby controllable objects. Yeah, this is debris at this point. I don't actually know how much these are, but we can check. 2,880. So this is a lot of fuel. No doubt about that. That's an awful lot of fuel. We won't have to contend with drag. So that's a thing. And that's going to be just a crazy amount of fuel that we need to put in there. So that's a bit of a concern. We could just ditch that and be like, you know what? We've got enough fuel to get to Duna. And that may actually be true. If we ditch these earlier on, that'll have a decent amount of additional fuel left over here. Because this is a lot of dead weight, right? And we probably have enough fuel, or, I'm just thinking here. Somewhere around, let's round up here, somewhere around 1 kilometer per second to exit Kerbal, and then another roughly 800. I'm going to round that up again to another kilometer per second to intercept Duna. And then if we have another kilometer per second for the maneuvers there, that would be about what we'd need. So somewhere around 3 kilometers per second. I believe that this is budgeted right now for like 1,500. And that's not including these tanks. That also doesn't include this fuel or this fuel, which is intended to push this a little further. So that's very interesting. No doubt about it. This is intended to remain empty, for the record. And I just didn't want to spread it evenly across all of these because that would have been a lot of work. But, well, not that much work. I suppose we could do it right now. We'd just have to pin open all of these, like so. So that's 4, 5, and 6. And then we'd just move this out, right? There we go. Problem solved. So that's now where it's intended to be, but we know that we're going to need a lot more fuel here if we want to refuel this. I'm actually surprised that we got this far, to be honest. I really thought that I'd need to put a decoupler here, put an engine here, and then we detach the engine once these tanks are dry to not carry that weight. That's what I thought we'd need. But apparently, this is fine. This works. So at this point, I'm going to leave this thing in orbit, and we're going to start thinking next episode about how we want to refuel this. That'll be interesting, for sure. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Dark Horse, Ethan Feldman, Upper Cumberland Gamers, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, The Lounge STL, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.